Hello, everybody, and thank you for waiting. We are here for our webinar, Percy and CircleCI. I'm Christopher Black, a solutions engineer with CircleCI, and joining me is David Jones, Director of Engineering at Percy. We have a fabulous webinar in store for everybody today. We're going to talk a little bit about orbs, we're going to talk a little bit about Percy, we're going to talk a little bit about Percy and CircleCI, and we're going to run through a live demo at the end. Maybe quick introductions real quick, David.
Yeah, so I'm the Director of Engineering at Percy, yeah, been a pretty long time CircleCI user. I honestly don't even remember the first time I noticed it. So probably in open source somewhere, yeah, happy to be sharing Percy and working with you.
Awesome. And just curious, when you say a long-time CircleCI user, this goes back to CircleCI 1.0 era?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Yep. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks for that, David. So I'm Christopher Black, a solutions engineer here with CircleCI. I've been with CircleCI for about three and a half years. And before transitioning into a more customer-facing role, I was on the SRE team. So my background is predominantly ops, DevOps, infrastructure-centric, but had the opportunity to I was involved in the re-architecture of the platform when we migrated from CircleCI 1.0 to 2.0. We completely re-architected the platform. We broke the monolith up into a series of microservices and whatnot. We embraced Kubernetes. Next slide. Awesome. So quick overview of our agenda today. I think we've already covered introductions, but again, we're going to talk a little bit about orbs. Orbs are awesome. Orbs are effectively shareable, templatized pieces of configuration. Probably one of the coolest new features to have been released within the past couple of months. We're going to talk a bit about Percy. We're going to talk about Percy and CircleCI together, and then we have a demo in store for everybody. And then I think we're going to have a couple of minutes for Q&A at the end. All right, so what are orbs? Orbs are effectively shareable, templatized pieces of configuration. That's kind of a simple overview. Effectively, the ability to share configuration across multiple projects. So historically, each CircleCI project had to have its own configuration file. The configuration file lived in the root directory of a project source code. Now we're able to share configuration across end projects. So a classic example would be, say you have a standard deployment model, say you have a standard deployment methodology for deploying to Kubernetes or ECS, being able to templatize that and then share that across end projects, right? Valuable for any number of reasons. But if nothing else, mitigating code reuse, facilitating easy onboarding for new projects, and things of that nature. And so, high-level overview, we're able to templatize the executors. And the executors are effectively the runtime environment for a CircleCI job, right? So an executor, the machine executor runs on a bare metal VM with elevated privileges. Most of the time, we're talking about the Docker executor. And then, of course, to facilitate mobile development, we have the Xcode executor as well. We can also templatize job stanzas. So again, that example I brought up a moment ago, if we had a standard deployment job, we could templatize that. And then, of course, we can templatize individual commands themselves. And it goes without saying that we can pass in parameters. Orbs can pull in bits and pieces from other orbs, etc. And here's kind of a contrived example on screen, but this gives you an idea of what an orb would look like inside your configuration file. I'm trying to see here. One thing I do want to point out at the top, though, in order to use orbs, you do have to specify version 2.1 in your configuration file, and that facilitates the advanced build, the advanced configuration processing and whatnot. Other than that, I think there's a project-specific setting for legacy projects, for projects that were added to the pre-CircleCI 2.0, and I think older projects. There's a build or project-specific setting you have to kick off in order to use orbs. Other than that, super straightforward. One other thing I want to point out, our orb registry is online. So you can check out all of our community orbs, our partner orbs. Every time an orb is published, they're self-documenting. The documentation is auto-generated. So yeah. And then, joining me today is David from Percy, one of our technology partners, but we have a number of technology partners who've authored standard orbs, for a number of popular languages, tools, frameworks, and whatnot. You see a couple of application telemetry orbs, Rollbar, Datadog. Percy authored an orb, JFrog authored an orb. And I don't think this list is exhaustive, but definitely check out the orb registry online. Let's get building. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David Jones.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks, Chris, and thanks for running through that. Yeah, so today, I want to chat about Percy, and let's just start by, what is it? It is your all-in-one visual testing and review platform, and what we do is we allow you to track visual changes across your web applications and component libraries. Let's just take a look at what are some of the things that we could catch here, and what is a visual regression exactly? Well, here we have a sign-up form, and we've made some changes to it, and unfortunately we've changed the text color on this button to the same color as its background. Now we don't know exactly what this is as a user. Seems like a bit of a problem there. Definitely a visual regression for sure. And you have to ask yourself, how would you go about detecting this in your current, if you were the developer of this? And one thing that you might do is you might have functional tests. So you might have a test that says hey, let's take a look at this button, load the sign up form, take a look at this button, and then check the text to make sure that there's a button on here that says sign up, pretty obvious. But the thing is that underneath the DOM of this page, this button actually does say sign up. So those tests are actually going to be completely green in this case, which is an interesting situation. So functional tests are not going to help us here. You might do some manual testing to currently detect an issue like this. So if you're reviewing someone's pull request and you've made a change like this, they might go ahead and check this out and load it up and then click through different screens to see if they see any issues. But chances are that person's not going to check all browsers or browser widths. They may not even check this page because this change may have been unintended and they were working on a different area. And so it's very error prone and very time consuming to really go down the manual path. So yeah, this is what we call a pretty firm visual regression here. And people make visual regressions all the time. Here is Google, for example, launching their latest Pixel 3 phone. And of course, the pre-order button has a visual regression on it here, where it's flowed off the edge of the button at the bottom. And yeah, I don't know how much testing went on. I don't know how this happened, but it happened, and it does happen to the best of us too. Here's another example, which is the RailsConf website, and I think they probably just neglected to test it in a mobile width of some type, and here the content is flowing off the side. And finally, here's one that we found on 1Password, where, I don't know, I would guess that this is some sort of CSS float issue or something like that to get the text to sort of around these social links to sort of bunch up like that. So this is where Percy really comes in and helps a lot. It allows you to view all of these visual differences that you're making, and so this is the main screen that you use to actually do a review. So on the left-hand side here, we have an application, and this is the original sort of screenshot, and then we've made some changes, and on the right-hand side, we have the new screenshot. And it may not be completely obvious as to, if you look at these two things, as to what we've actually changed here. But when you click the image on the right-hand side, it toggles our diff overlay that translates any pixels that change between these two things into red pixels, so you can see exactly what changed. And if you kind of go backwards and forwards between these two, as we usually do, you can kind of see that, oh, it looks like we changed a green color to a blue one. Maybe that was actually a variable somewhere that had an effect, a sort of a cascading effect on on other elements in the UI here. And so, yeah, this is what we call a visual diff. And you know, when using Percy, you'll get really used to reading these diffs. You'll look at these a lot, and you'll instantly find your eyes are drawn to these red pixels, and helps you figure out what changed, and helps you decide if that's a good change or not. And we also do these visual diffs across responsive widths.
Awesome.
So if you need to test a mobile view or something a bit smaller or wider, we can capture all of those, no problem. And in addition to that, we're doing cross-browser testing, so you can test across Chrome and Firefox to make sure that you hit all the major browsers and cover the most sort of realistic version of what your customers are seeing. So yeah, so we also, I sort of want to call out that like this is a page that is comprised of many different components, and we're detecting all of sort of a sweeping change that affects all of these components, and providing an easy way to sort of see that. And sort of the UI state that is required here is kind of complicated. Like we've got some to-dos that are like checked off, and all sorts of interesting things that a certain day selected on the calendar and so forth. So the UI state can be kind of complicated too. We can snapshot everything at each state. So let's just assume now that we're happy with these changes, and we've now gone ahead and hit the approve button. And so it triggers that as approved. And yeah, if you hit that button, you should be happy with these changes, and they should be ready to ship. So
awesome.
Yeah. Cool. So so that's sort of a quick run through of what Percy does, and sort of where it fits in. And so you might be kind of wondering at this point, it's like, okay, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, I want to get this into my application. This looks awesome. Yeah, we have a wide range of testing libraries, test frameworks, component frameworks that we integrate with. And here's just a selection of some of them. We also have a whole bunch more, and you can also build your own SDK pretty easily. We have some documentation for that as well. So if we don't cover something already that you're using, then I'm sure we'll be able to, I'm sure you'll be able to build an SDK to build on top of that. So yeah, how does it fit in with your CircleCI flow? You know, pretty important question. You know, if you've decided to integrate this and you've got it working locally, you know, a real key value proposition here is getting it automatically running on every commit, right? Yeah. And so it very quickly becomes a question of how do you integrate it with your CircleCI workflow. And so this is probably the simplest possible diagram that I can show to represent like where it fits in. So your workflow is going to start, and then you may have a number of test runners. So I know it's very common for developers to split their test workload on multiple nodes so that you can parallelize the work and make it run quickly. And on those test runners, you will need to set a Percy parallel token to -1, sorry, total to -1, and a Percy token to, that's a token that we give you when you set up your project on Percy. And then once all of those test runs are finished, then you have to call a Percy finalize all command that basically tells Percy like, hey, this entire build, regardless of how parallelized it was, everything is done here, and we should wrap up the build and start processing. And so that part we've wrapped into a CircleCI org, which makes it really straightforward for you to be able to just like throw it in with very minimal configuration into your workflow.
That's awesome. I just want to disambiguate something,
Yeah.
one thing real quick for the benefit of our viewers. What is a workflow? So in a lot of other, CI platforms, people coming from a Jenkins background, workflows, pipelines, the two terms are effectively interchangeable, but a workflow is an orchestration of jobs that are connected together in some logical fashion. What's really great about workflows in our platform is that users have total control over the dependency graph between various jobs in a workflow. And then, quick question, the only parameter we're passing to the Percy orb is the Percy token.
That's right. Yep, that's right.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it also has a default value of the environment variable called Percy token as well. So in many cases, you probably won't need to even use the parameter for it. But we can. That's a good segue into so what's coming up. Yeah, if you want to kind of look at the configuration of how this actually works, first of all, as Chris pointed out here, your CircleCI configuration version must be 2.1 or greater. And then you're going to be able to import and sort of specify the Percy agent orb as for available in your workflow here. And then further down, Chris, as you mentioned, like one of the key values of workflows is that you're able to specify dependencies between the steps. And so here we're specifying that finalize all step at the end, and it has a dependency that requires all of the tests have run. And so that's what we're specifying at the very bottom.
Awesome.
And so that's how it's called. And yeah, this is sort of what an example looks like. It's not that exact configuration we just looked at, but it's pretty similar. Pretty typical steps here to check out some code and install some dependencies, run your tests, and then you'll have a Percy finalize call at the end. So that's sort of like just generally what the workflow looks like.
Quick question, David. Why do we call Percy finalize at the end of the workflow?
Very good question. Very good question. Gets to the core of why this is important. If you weren't to set up Percy in this particular way, let's say that you split your tests into 5 different parallel workers. What will happen is that Percy will create a build for each worker, and so you're going to end up with 5 individual builds, and that's not particularly useful. You don't want to have like one build that has like some portion of your tests and then another one and so forth. So by setting the Percy parallel total to -1, we're basically saying like, hey, like we don't know how parallelized this is. Could be 5 workers, it could be far more, or it could be 1. It doesn't really matter. You'll be able to scale that up and down without worrying. And then the finalize all call at the end is basically saying like, okay, for this particular build, like regardless of how many we've created, everything is done by this point, and do not receive any new snapshots after this point. And so it provides a very clean way for us to be able to support fairly complicated, highly parallelized workflows.
Awesome.
And by having people set it up this way, it also makes it so that it's very flexible. So even if they start with one, like a single threaded sort of setup, they can move to a parallel one, and everything will just continue to work perfectly. So
awesome. Yeah, well, that makes perfect sense. Thanks for that, David. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. What does the actual contents of the orb look like? You may even be thinking like, hey, I want to build my own orb. Maybe I've got some start for it. So here's just like the contents of our orb. So we have an executor at the top, which is pulling from a Percy agent image, Docker image here, and then we're defining a command that you can run. Called finalize all, which is doing that finalize all step, and we have the parameter defaulting, Percy token parameter defaulting to the environment variable, and it has a single step in it, which takes the parameter and specifies it here, and then runs a Percy finalize all command. And then the jobs that are exposed, the finalize all job, which has a single step that runs the finalize all command. So pretty straightforward usage of an orb, but very, very useful here. And yeah, you may be wondering, like, hey, what's the contents of that Docker image that you've just thrown in there? Yeah, here's a quick look at the contents behind that. It's basically just installing from Node. We have to skip a Chromium download because we don't actually need Chromium in this particular case with Percy agent. And it just globally installs Percy agent, which gives you that Percy command that's available for running. And I checked, and the total image size of this is 285 megabytes. So it's not too shabby.
Awesome. Yeah, elegant in its simplicity. And just quick question, that last command in the org, the Percy finalize all, at this point, we're either invoking the SDK or the CLI.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. Yes, yeah. That's right.
Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep. Okay. Cool. So yeah, let's just assume that you've got it all integrated with our orb, and you've got it in your project now. We haven't really got to the workflow yet. The other benefits of Percy is that it integrates really well with your developer workflow. So we support GitHub and GitHub Enterprise and GitLab and GitLab's self-managed products, and we allow you to link your Percy project to your GitHub or GitLab repo, and we will set commit statuses for you. So this is where it gets really powerful, because now when you issue a pull request, you're going to see your CircleCI builds start to run. But then as that's running, you'll see a Percy status pop up there. And if there's any changes that need to be reviewed, we're going to call that out right there in the pull request and allow you to click over to the details to review those changes. And so yeah, it can be, if you have it so that you don't allow merges if any of the statuses are red, then this is like a hard requirement for someone to go look at this before merging.
Awesome.
And so let's just assume that we click the details there, and here again, we're back at this UI, we're reviewing these changes, and they look good, so let's approve that. And then back here over on GitHub, we've changed our status to green, and this is good to merge at this point.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's honestly, this is one of the sort of golden moments as a developer working on this stuff is having that feel and that feedback when you're working on a pull request, and hitting a moment like this where it's calling out these changes and you have a chance to review them. It's a really, really nice sort of developer tool to have.
Absolutely, yeah. Narrowing the distance between idea and implementation, and just kind of following up what you were talking about earlier. So we could have an automated unit test that, for example, tests the text field of a given HTML element, right? Mm-hmm. That test would pass on Circle. You'd get the green check as far as Circle PR is concerned, but you could have a gnarly visual regression that could totally slip through the cracks.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so let's just jump into the demo. How much time have we got? Okay, we're about halfway through-ish. So let's just
great. Yeah, and we'll have some time at the end for Q&A.
Okay. So yeah, here let me just make this a little bit bigger for everyone. So we have an example app here, and I just want to take you through this example app. We're going to add Percy to it. It's got CircleCI running already. We're going to add CircleCI to the Percy CircleCI configuration into it, and then make some changes and kind of just like demonstrate this flow. So what do we have here? Well, if we take a look at the package file here, actually let's just fire it up real quick. I think that'll be.
Ooh, now we're talking.
All right, so yes, what this is the To-Do MVC app. I'm sure some of you have probably heard of this one before. It's implements a lot of different libraries and things, and it's just a simple to-do app. You can go visit CircleCI. You can add to-dos, and you can check them off, and you can clear them when they're complete. So it's a very, very simple app.
This is awesome.
So I'm just going to stop that now. So let's take a deeper look at what we have here. Yeah, so you just want to use start and stop. So it has those two things. We have some tests set up, and we have a pre-test set up, which just starts the server. So the essence of this is that it starts the server, runs some tests, and stops the server. And I've, just for demo purposes, I do not recommend like splitting things up in this way, but just for demo purposes, I've thrown in the Circle node index here, which starts at 0, and as you parallelize your build, it will go to 1, 2, 3, 4, etc.
Right.
And I've made it split the tests that run, so we have a to-do 0 spec and a to-do 1 spec, just to keep things very simple for demo purposes. So we split these things into 2 and then run those things in parallel. Yeah, so what are we running exactly? Well, let's take a look here. So here's a basic example. So we require, this whole example is using Puppeteer, which is a common package for driving Chrome, and it's officially looked after by the Google Chrome team. And yeah, it's really useful for just like opening a browser, doing some things, and yeah, and doing whatever you want and remotely controlling the browser. So before each test here, we're simply launching Puppeteer, which is launching a headless browser. These flags are important for running in Docker, actually, in a secure environment that doesn't have all the privileges that you might have when you're running it on your computer. And then we open up a new page ready for each thing. And then once we have finished the test, we close down the browser. So this entire file actually only has one test in it, which is down the bottom here, which is when we're describing the index of this thing, we just are checking to make sure it loads. And we go to the test URL. We make sure that the main container inside the app exists, and we consider that a pass. And there's some more tests in here as well, which have something similar in the to-do 1 spec, which actually go ahead and add a to-do. So they like type in the field I just typed before, they actually hit enter on the keyboard, and we check to make sure that a to-do exists and so forth. And this one here actually checks the to-do off by clicking an element on the screen here. So yeah, so this is all works and runs, and we can actually go have a look at that. So here's the flow for this. We check out the code, install the dependencies, and run the tests. And when we look at running the tests here in Circle, we just see that it has, this particular run has 1 pass on it, and this other one here, this is the second parallel worker, has 2 specs that pass. And you can see the server getting created and torn down at the end. Awesome. So yeah, pretty straightforward. So let's see if we can get some Percy in here and get some visual coverage. So so let's go back here, and we'll yarn add the Percy Puppeteer SDK, and we'll just save that as a development dependency.
David, I like your terminal plugins.
Good. I feel like people spend too much time tuning these things.
Yeah, I was going to say, I spent a bit of time on mine. Just quick question, are you a Vim or an Emacs user?
Neither.
Oh, curveball.
Quickly becoming a VS Code user.
Awesome, yeah.
Okay, so yes, now we have installed the dependency here, so you can see that Percy Puppeteer was added. So the first step is that we're going to want to wrap our test run with a Percy exec command. background. So we want to put Percy exec in here. And what this does is it essentially runs the tests as a sub-process, and then Percy is sort of wrapping itself around our existing process and is keeping an agent process running in the background the entire time, and then auto-tearing it down at the end once the sub-process is finished.
Interesting.
And when you're making snapshot calls along the way, it's basically talking to Percy agent, which is running in the background.
Right.
So yeah, this is a very, anyone familiar with like bundle exec or anything like that will feel a little bit at home with the sort of syntax. Yeah, so now we've got that done, we can now actually start to put snapshot calls in here. So one of the things that was made available to us is the Percy snapshot function here, and we can require that from Percy Puppeteer. Let's check that in the other file. Oops, that was weird. Okay, cool. Okay, so focus on this one for now. We are loading the homepage of this to-do app, and so let's take a snapshot of it once it's loaded and just like see if we can get it working here. So, so we have to await the Percy snapshot call, and as you can see, VS Code is quite nicely pointed out that it expects a page which comes from Puppeteer. Which we have available because that's what we've been interacting with, and you have to specify the name of this test. So you could put anything in here. You could say this is the home page or whatever. But one really nice thing is actually just use this test.full title, and what that does is it's because this is a Mocha test. Sorry. We have a describe call here, index, and then it loads and it automatically compiles those two pieces of text together into one nice full title. Yeah, so it just like makes it easy to drop all these things in without having to like invent a new title each time.
Certainly.
Cool, so we've got that going. Let's just drop in this other test as well at the end, like once we've added a to-do, let's take a snapshot here. And once we've actually checked it to go off at the end, let's add one here too. Yeah, and one thing I just want to call out is like for any of these, you can specify the as some options here, the responsive widths that we were talking about earlier. So you can have 512, 1020, 1024. Etc. in here, and that's how you configure per snapshot kind of basis
very interesting.
for the responsive widths. I'm just going to leave that off for now, just for simplicity's sakes, but that's what you can do. Cool. All right, so let's modify our CircleCI configuration to make sure that we actually hook the orb in here and yeah, make this function. So yeah, this is the steps that you from the workflow that you saw earlier. Like we just have installing dependencies, running tests, and checking out the code. And we have some cache around that at the moment. And the key thing here is like the run tests have a parallelism of 2, and our workflow is defined at the bottom here. Almost just exactly the code version of what you just saw through the CircleCI UI. So step 1, we will want to add the orb configuration and tell CircleCI configuration, hey, we'd like to use this orb and make it available here. So you do that by going orbs, and then we're going to call this one Percy, and we'll import from Percy agent. And I'm happy to use the volatile one at the moment. You can specify any version number you want here. Really, just a way of saying, give me the latest one, and I don't care, which version it is. probably not best practice.
Living life on the edge, David. One thing I want to call out, I want to give you a shout out actually for using both YAML anchor and aliases in your configuration files. So in conjunction with orbs, I find that people who use YAML anchors and aliases, it's a really effective way to just cut down on the verbosity of the syntax and all of that. So yeah, I mean, that's awesome.
We've got these defaults here that are getting reused from the stuff at the top here.
Perfect. Yeah, and for the benefit of those, for our viewers and whatnot, again, that's like a really awesome way. Those in conjunction with orbs is a really awesome way to streamline your configuration file, cut down on some of the superfluous code.
Very useful for reusing Ruby on Rails database configurations.
Oh, great! Yeah, great use case. Yeah,
that's where I learned that trick.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Drag. I'm just going to add some additional stuff here. Okay, so we now want to call that workflow from the org that we just had. And so, yeah, you can, because we called it Percy, you can call a finalize all command here. And let's see, and we make it requires. Oops.
And I'm sure many of you are all familiar, but down at the bottom, starting on line 56, is where we define our workflow stanza. Specifically, this is where we orchestrate and define the relationship between the different jobs in this workflow.
Yeah. So I'm just going to make sure I get the.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, exactly.
Also. So yeah, basically what this is saying is like, hey, run the tests, and then once all of the tests are run, regardless of how parallelized, call to finalize all part of the org.
Precisely.
And if we just take, just going to drag that up a little bit. Okay. There is also a CircleCI validation. CircleCI. Config validate?
Yeah.
Yes. So
Perfect.
I like to use this because I make YAML indentation issues, and so this just tells me everything is good.
I'm really glad you brought this up. Yeah, so we have a command line interface for, you can run Docker builds locally, but I think one of the more powerful aspects for the CircleCI is to just validate the configuration, validate your YAML syntax and whatnot. It's really awful when you push a configuration file upstream just to find out that your YAML spacing is off by...
Happens to me all the time.
Same, yeah.
I mean, you saw how it gets a little tricky when you have like many nested sort of indentations going on. Yeah, okay, and then the final thing is the adding the environment variable to say, hey, we want to use a parallelized token, total of -1. We'll just specify this here in our environment. So we've got the Percy parallel total -1. Cool. Okay, so let's. No idea if this works or not. We'll see. So just in review, here are the changes. So we imported our org. We specified the Percy parallel token, total is -1. And we've added a step to our workflow to say, hey, finalize all after all we've run all the tests. We adapted our Mocha test run to have a Percy exec command in front of it. And we added the Percy Puppeteer SDK. We've dropped in a few Percy Snapshot calls here along the way in our test suite. And yeah, the rest is the log file. So let's go ahead and commit. All right, so that's kicked off. Let's go back here. Take a look at my workflow. So look at that. I've kicked off a new build.
Awesome. And we get a nice visualization of the relationship
I really
between,
love this view. It's very useful.
Certainly.
As you can imagine, I'm a pretty visual person working on a visual product like this, and I really enjoy seeing it laid out like this. It just makes a lot of sense.
Certainly, yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah. So I know that this takes about 45 seconds or so, and then it'll jump onto the run tests. Yeah, and then we'll be into the final bit of our demo coming up. We'll make some modifications to this code base with a feature branch.
Awesome.
And review it over there. So let's see. All right, it's finished now, and then now we're running the tests. And yeah, as you can see, there's two workers going on here, 2 nodes. We run in the logs here, you can see, oh, it's already finished. So you can see that we created a build in Percy, and here's the link to that build, and ran the snapshot. So when you're thinking about the Percy exec command, like that's exactly what this is doing. It's it's started and stopped Percy here.
And as you said, folks comfortable with the bundle exec paradigm and whatnot will be very at home here.
Yeah,
awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's finished, and let's just go back to, this is so a few seconds ago, this top build here, this is what that build looks like in Percy. So because this is a brand new build and we haven't actually changed anything yet, we just integrated it fresh. So here you see on the left, we didn't have any snapshots before, and then now we have these different screenshots that have been taken, and they're also, you can view them at different widths and across the different browsers as well. So yeah, super great there. All right, so let's bring this thing home, and the final thing we're going to do is create a feature branch here and see a diff coming in. So imagine I know you've been tasked to make the title of this to-do app a little bit better, and so let's just check out a new feature branch here. Let's say, let's go super fancy title. And we will just go back, back here. And I have one prepared, so it's not actually that fancy. It just makes it bold and changes the to-do title to blue. So I'm going to comment out the old to-do title and uncomment a blue one for some reason. And let's just go ahead and you can see the diff there, and let's go ahead and commit that. All right. So we'll push that up, and let's go take a look at what's going on in Circle over here. Let's go back to our workflows. All right, 2 seconds ago, it's picked up my new branch. And running the tests.
Wicked fast.
Right. Onto just, the dependencies already. Yeah, and I'll keep an eye on this one on the Percy side this time, because it's interesting to sort of like watch it come in real time as well. So let's go with the dependencies. I think I probably didn't set up my yarn cache key properly.
I was gonna ask if you're leveraging some of our powerful caching features.
Yeah. Right. All right, so that's finished, and now it's running the tests. All right, and if we refresh over here in Percy, let's see, it should come in any moment now. All right, there it goes. So it's receiving the build, which is basically a state to say like, hey, we created this build in Percy, and we're still like taking snapshot calls at the moment, and we haven't finalized it yet. And yeah, looks like it's probably good. It's still running. Okay, cool, success. All right, so here we can see the changes we made. So yeah, here's like the original one. I made the bold and blue title here, and so you can click on and off to like view the diff modes. Let's have a look at mobile here, and yeah, it's pretty cool. So the final thing here would be to
the PR.
Take a look at the PR.
Great.
Yeah, so if we go here and not the client, we want the example. We've got our super fancy title here, and the base is wrong. Just gonna change that.
Good catch.
Cool. Okay, so that's the change we made. And look, well, let's see, I'm just gonna create this pull request. Please nobody merge it. So
force push master.
So yeah, CircleCI ran all its steps, and you can see that 3 visual changes are needed here, and we've blocked this PR from being merged, and so we're able to click over.
And by clicking details on the build status or the status of the PR, it redirects you back to the dashboard in Percy.
That's right. Yep.
Awesome.
Yep, that's right. It takes you straight there. And yeah, it's kind of fun to like look at the differences and say the full screen mode between like browsers. Like there's just like very subtle differences. If you notice that sort of like jumping up and down that you wouldn't usually like just pick up.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so I don't know, it looks good to me. And so I'm going to go ahead and approve that now. And now when we go back to GitHub, take a look at our pull request that we've made.
Great.
And everything's looking great. So we can confidently merge this, knowing precisely what visual changes we've made. And yeah, that's it. That's the demo.
David, thank you so much. This is awesome. You know, again, my background is mostly ops infrastructure, but I can certainly appreciate both the simplicity and just the value prop here. This is really awesome. A couple of our viewers have asked some pretty good questions.
Okay.
Josh asked, "Do you have any?"
Hey, Josh.
How's it going, Josh? Do you have any suggestions or ideas as to how Percy could be used, maybe using the SDK to test visual changes between A/B or multivariate testing environments?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think what I would do, and what we actually do, we have like feature flags and stuff like that in Percy Web, which is our front-end framework that's driving the entire UI. And usually what I would do is make it so that you actually get your tests into this stage where it has a certain A/B test or a certain flag enabled. And then you're able to like snapshot at that state. So, so yeah, you can get visual coverage across those kind of different like test options and different code paths, setting your test suite up in that way.
Certainly, certainly. An anonymous attendee, hello anonymous attendee, is asking about the 5K free snapshots.
Yes, good question. Yeah, I think we've been quite generous actually. You know, just so everyone knows, yeah, we have 5,000 snapshots that we let you take for free at the moment. You can have up to 10 users on your account for free, and you can create unlimited projects. Yeah, we're really trying to and making Percy sort of extremely accessible to a lot of folks out there who want to use it. And our paid plans start at $29 a month as well. Yeah, I really hope to see lots of people adopting this as part of their standard flow.
Certainly, certainly. Can Percy take snapshots of different UI states? For example, if a user was hovered over a button or a user was logged in and not logged in?
Yeah, absolutely. That largely comes down to actually the test framework that you're using. Okay. You might be using, say, Cypress, for example, to do some end-to-end testing. And as part of that, you might log in, you might have some steps to say, go to the login page and then log in with this test user and then have a Percy snapshot call. And in that world, it's a cy.Percy snapshot is the helper.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we completely support all those sorts of flows. You can be logged in. You can get into you could trigger like a drop down on a menu or whatever. It doesn't really matter.
Gotcha.
Any kind of UI state that you want to check, we can snapshot it. So.
Awesome, which kind of leads me to my next question. How does Percy handle dynamic web pages and or animations?
Yeah, we've had many learnings from this. The core of this problem is that you might have, say, an animated GIF, for example.
Great example.
This is, everyone loves GIFs. Let's say your homepage has a GIF on it that's auto-playing.
Yeah.
Then when we go to take a screenshot, the chances of us actually snapshotting the same frame at the same time on your page is very, very rare. And so we've built in our browser rendering infrastructure, which is extremely scalable. But in addition to that, we have a very stable snapshot environment that has been very specifically built to take screenshots of web pages in very stable conditions, and that causes the snapshots to be deterministic each time. So we'll freeze animated GIFs, we'll freeze auto-playing videos. There's like a large list of things that we deal with, and if anyone has tried to do this themselves, they will know exactly all of these problems. They come up pretty quickly, and we've spent a lot of time investing and solving this particular problem for people. And in addition to that, I will say that some things are not related to like things auto-playing, but rather maybe you have a test suite that generates fake data for a page. That's pretty common. And so the workaround for that is that most fake data like generators have a seed that you can set, and it makes it deterministic from that seed every time. So if you have a randomized date or a name that gets generated from a random number,
as long as you know what that seed is,
the seed will freeze at every time. So we just ask that people freeze their fake data. Yeah.
Well said. How are we doing on time? Going to pause for any additional questions.
We've got 4 minutes left.
We have 4 minutes left. Pause for questions, comments. I have another question though. Just can you test individual components as well as full page renders?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we have support for a bunch of different component libraries as well.
Okay.
So while I've shown you today like full page kind of end-to-end testing, such as Puppeteer or Cypress. We also support other component libraries as well, and just like soak up all of your components and instantly snapshot all of them every time. Folks who like to develop in that way can make excellent use of Percy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I have another question.
Okay.
Anecdotally, while we're waiting for some of the other folks, anecdotally, would you say most of your customers are kind of at the bleeding edge of front-end web development? They're using tools like React, they're leveraging responsive frameworks and whatnot. Tell me just a little bit about your customer base.
Yeah, it's a mix of everything.
Okay.
I think the thing in common is people who have audiences that they just really don't want to ship visual regressions to, and so as you're building out a team and you've got lots of people working on any code base, the chances of like accidentally introducing some bug, as you saw in like the Google Pixel example, like I don't know how many people were behind that kind of that store, but like you know, that's the kind of like thing that it just comes up, and I think that's what's in common is people don't want to ship visual regressions to people, and they need, and as a developer, it just provides you with so much confidence.
Yeah,
you know, when you merge that pull request, you just know. So yeah, we have large teams and people using it on small projects as well as open source projects and so forth. With our recent pricing change, we've just made it accessible to a whole lot more people. So I think that we'll have a changing customer base actually over time, and as we've made it sort of lowered the point of entry there.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, so people have the opportunity to get their hands on the platform, really experience the value prop, learn the ins and outs, hopefully build on Circle, invoke an orb and whatnot. And orb has made it wicked easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah, cool.
Well, unless there aren't any other questions, I want to thank everybody for your time and patronage. And David, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you very much, Chris.
All right. Cheers, everyone.
Bye, everyone.